There are only 27 games left in Miami's regular season, but that still leaves lots of questions about this team as they prepare for the playoffs. Can everyone stay healthy? Who's out of the rotation? We'll break down everything you need to know to get ready for the end of the season, plus the latest updates from Heat practice on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, it's longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Got a packed show for you today. We're going to get into the biggest questions facing the Heat over the next 27 games of the season. But before we do that, let's start with some updates from today's Heat practice. Terry Rozier and Josh Richardson will travel with the team. In fact, everybody is traveling with the team. The way somebody put it to me was, it's one big happy family going on this 4-game trip. Eric Spoelstra sounded optimistic that one of Rozier or Richardson could return, although he would not specify which one. In Spo's always coy manner, he almost let it slip that, yeah, I think I'm optimistic that they could return. And then Sun Sentinel's Ira Winderman said, oh, which one? Like both or which one? And then Spo started to we'll see. I'll let you guys figure that one out. So let's figure it out. He wouldn't say which one, but in practice, Terry Rozier, no brace on that knee, no wrap on the knee. He wasn't going through any of the post-practice like one-on-ones that they do or shooting drills or anything like that. But Josh Richardson was in a full sling with that as he recovers from that dislocated right shoulder. And so I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think Rozier is the one that might be back sooner rather than later and could return on this 4-game trip. But that would be an educated guess. And it kind of aligns with some of the things that we've been hearing in terms of the timeline anyway, that Rozier could be back before Josh Richardson. What do you think?
I mean, I guess that Rozier seems like it's the most likely just because, he's not walking around in a cast or he doesn't have a full wrap or anything like that. Whereas when you have to hold your arm up in a sling, that usually indicates that you're not anywhere close to returning to full strength. That means that muscle there, whatever's holding your shoulder or arm in place, is probably weakened because of the injury. So my guess would be that Josh is probably going to be out for some considerable amount of time too. Plus now you have your backup point guard, Delon Wright, that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I just, obviously the need to be as coy as they have been, these players are going to return to the lineup at some point. We'll see them around, they're going to be on this 4-game road trip. We'll see them on or off the injury list, There's no reason to be so.
You can't give the opponent any sort of inclination, any hints that your players on the roster might play in the basketball game that's on the schedule.
I think neither the Trailblazers nor the Denver Nuggets are like, well, Terry Rozier is this close to returning, so
we have a separate game plan if it's Terry Rozier who comes back, and a separate game plan if it's Josh Richardson who comes back soon. Yeah, they got all
completely scrap everything. This changes our base defense. Funny. What do we do? So it's just fun. I don't know.
That's fine. Yeah, you think Rozier? I think Rozier. That's good. Jimmy Butler was a participant at practice today.
There you go.
Did not speak with the media as per usual, but he was there, and Eric Spoelstra was asked whether he was going to. I think I asked Eric Spoelstra. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Sounds like Jimmy Butler's playing Friday night. That's at least the plan for now. But the big takeaway from practice, the big headline, was that it was also the first time we heard from Delon Wright since he signed with the Heat off of a buyout from Washington over the break. He told an awesome story about how he ended up in Miami, and apparently, David, we have Udonis Haslem to thank. Here's what Delon had to say.
What was that first conversation like with Darrell after you made the decision to sign here?
So when he was just down here for UD's retirement, he was him and a few other Q-Rich. They were telling Spo and I think Pat y'all need to trade for Delon. This is before the deadline. Y'all need to trade for Delon. He'll fit perfectly. And I was like, yeah, I would do it. I wasn't against it. But once the buyout opportunity came, we talked about it, and he was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's time to go. We got to go do this. So he was pretty much the one that jump-started everything. So, it's his idea.
That's how business gets done in the NBA, David. You just have dinner and you say, hey, this would be kind of cool. And you're like, yep. And here's what we know. The Heat did call Washington about Delon Wright before the trade deadline. That has been reported. We know this. They couldn't get a deal done, but maybe they thought, well, if they're not going to be able to trade Delon Wright elsewhere, then he's going to get bought out. He did have interest or other teams were interested in him, but Delon Wright said, I was locked in Miami. It's so obvious why. He was so excited to be on that practice floor. It was the first time he was on that practice court since he was 12 years old, when he was running around with his older brother Darrell during Heat games. He was telling those stories too, and Eric Spoelstra was telling those stories. Just a lot of feel-good vibes, David. And you and I talked about not only the contributions he can have on the floor, but the vibe contributions that Delon Wright can have. And we've compared it last year to the Kevin Love situation, where the positive vibes he added to that locker room.
Yes.
This dude is all positivity, all vibes, and just good vibes at practice today overall.
That's what a happy man, and what a great story for him. Like, just to be able to come back, because there's just something incredible about the idea of him as a child tagging along with your big brother, who's drafted out of high school, and now he's a member of the Miami Heat, and you're there watching Shaquille O'Neal, Dwayne Wade, and all these larger than life players, and you're kind of just like honing your game. And I got to shoot with these guys. I got to play here in the practice floor, and now I'm back as an adult, helping this team for something real. And I know he talked about that as well, the fact that he's playing for something similarly to what we talked about with Terry Rozier. It's like, what? Now all of a sudden there's added stakes to this season, and it's just incredible. Again, a success story for Delon Wright. And I think the vibes are going to be a positive one. I maybe it's overstating things, and I know it maybe a lot of people who look for a much more analytical bent might suspend this kind of idea. But to me, having that positivity, having that good attitude as they're going into the playoffs, I think it counts a lot. Like, the power of friendship, as much as it might have been blown up last year, I think it meant something. Like, it helped, Duncan Robinson unlock his potential again, sitting next to Kevin Love. It helped the team kind of vibe. And you sacrifice ego, you sacrifice, your idea of what your role is going to be, because it's all about the good of the team and you're playing for each other. That means something. I think that's why Miami remains one of the most dangerous teams in the Eastern Conference, because of that power of friendship, if you will.
And because Eric Spoelstra's leadership, he's able to coach these guys hard while also not, and hold them accountable while also not sort of having that vibe sputter and go off the rails either, right? And so you mentioned Delon Wright talking about just going from a losing situation to a winning situation. We do have the clip right here.
Playing 2 minutes, 3 minutes on a team that's not really trying to win, to now playing for something. Yeah, I'm definitely re-energized. I'm just ready.
Like, he went from a 9-win, he could not stop smiling, David. He couldn't stop smiling. He was so happy to talk. He was like so excited for his media session, first time in his before. He's like, I love talking
media
to media
day vibes, It's
yeah,
like,
it was.
It's all juiced up, yeah.
But really you go from a 9-win Wizards team where you're out of the rotation because they're trying to play young guys instead of you, to a 30-win Miami Heat team that you grew up idolizing Dwayne Wade. Remember, he was part of the Dwayne Wade Last Dance Heat jersey swaps. Idolizing obviously his older brother, who played there. Can you believe this? 20 years ago. Eric Spoelstra was like, Darrell was here 20 years ago, and everybody like in those media circles was like, oh my god, that was 2 decades ago. That seems like everybody felt old at the same moment, which was pretty nice. But no, you're right. When the vibes matter, and if anybody who really covers the NBA, like, look, obviously the X's and O's and the schematic things and talent obviously matters. You have to be so freaking talented for the vibes to not matter. Like, unhappy teams have won championships. The unhappy, like the Heat, I wouldn't say they were unhappy in 2013, but it was a struggle. But like, bad vibes kind of ruined them in 2011 against the Mavericks. I always said it was a miracle they even got to the finals in 2011 against Dallas.
Because bad vibes probably played more of a factor in 2014 when LeBron.
In 2014 for sure, and then but they didn't win. I'm saying like teams have won championships with bad vibes, like the final year of Kobe Shaq. That last Kevin Durant Warriors team, the one not the one that lost to Toronto, but even the one in 2018, the vibes weren't awesome with that team either. But those teams were so supremely talented. This Miami Heat team is not supremely talented like those all-star,
they need that
laden Hall of Famer teams. But like, vibes matter. Even the Denver Nuggets, like going into the championship last year, some of the changes they made in their locker room from one year to the other, and their GM has talked about this, contributed to them being able to make a sustained playoff run. So all of it matters, but you can't dismiss, to your point, David, you can't dismiss the vibe factor completely. No matter how analytical and X's and O's and just like grinding tape and posting highlights on Twitter you gotta appreciate the vibe factor of all these things. But happy to have Delon Wright in Miami. We'll see who ends up playing on Friday night. Again, it looks like Jimmy Butler is going to be available. Terry Rozier and Josh Richardson have been ruled out, to be clear, for Friday's game in New Orleans. Tyler Hero is questionable with a foot thing, and Duncan Robinson is expected to play, even though Jaylen Brown tried to rip his arm off. So we'll end the updates there, and then we will zoom out and look ahead to the biggest questions for the Miami Heat over their final 27 games of the regular season, coming up next on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, your size, and your budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. If you don't like to shop, and I know a lot of people don't, they save you time and effort. Plus, you get outfits that make you feel good and look good. So, style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. David, I feel like I've been reading that tag for my entire life on this show, coming out of the first segment, going into the second segment. If you guys aren't tuning into that, you got to give it a shot. Our show is streamed on there. It's streamed today at 5:45. It's streaming right now as we record this on that channel. And it's streamed there several times before. And it's a great way to keep in touch with what's going on with the rest of the NBA and all of the sports landscape in general. Please make me stop reading that tag. Okay. If you guys listen, I get to stop reading it. Let's go. Let's jump into I have 5 questions that I have for the Miami Heat over the next 27 games. You have 5 questions. I do wonder how many of our questions line up, if any. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I none of them do, actually. But one I will knock out quickly because it's just one that we just talked about right now. It's the additions of Terry Rozier and now, of course, the addition of Delon Wright. What are the vibes heading into the postseason? Because I think that's a big question for me. We've got a taste of what it could be after today's press conference and practice. But at the same time, we saw this last year too, right? At the same time, Kevin Love on the buyout, good vibes. Everybody's talking about it. Feels good. No trade happened. But at the same time, you get in a player of Kevin Love's caliber and his obvious fit on the roster, and everybody seems hunky-dory. It's all positive, right? Well, what happens? They lose a bunch of games. He looks a little bit older. He couldn't quite find his footing yet. A lot of up and down between then and the postseason. And then all of a sudden, everything just clicks. Or maybe the process was building behind the scenes and we weren't really aware of it. But slowly but surely, as the postseason rolled towards, everything all of a sudden really started clicking into place. So we might see something similar with that. It might be over the next 27 games, a lot of kind of trying to incorporate things without Terry Rozier, without Josh Richardson. Maybe Delon Wright struggles a little. Who knows? You could see a lot of this. But I think the steps, the foundation are right there. And as we all know the story of the 3 little pigs, if you don't have the right foundation, everything's going to fall apart. So I think it's really important to kind of just keep that in mind. It might go through some bumps on the road, but I think overall it's going to be positive. But that's one of the things I'm looking for as the season continues to roll forward.
Yeah, and the tough thing there, and this kind of goes into mind, is can they just stay healthy, right? And part of the vibes is getting these guys together on the court. Rozier, we don't know when he's going to come back, although we suspect it could be within the next week or so, within these next 4 games. Josh Richardson, we don't know. Delon Wright, you're obviously adding to the mix here. What are they going to get? 20-ish games to really build chemistry? They have turned over their point guard rotation completely since before the season started, and they're doing it mid-season. I asked Spo about it after practice today, and he kind of was like, we're positionless, and we have so many guys who are trained to handle the ball and bring the ball up and initiate offense, which is true. Tyler Hero, Josh Richardson, when he's healthy, Nikola Jovic, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, like all these guys.
Chris Quinn, everybody,
Kevin Love can run offense for him. He's done it out of the high post and stuff like that. So, you've got, but the point guard is also a position on the floor. I agree that it's not as important as like sort of spread pick and roll heavy teams, which Miami obviously is not. But you've also added 2 major rotation pieces to your roster, regardless of position. So they do need some time to gel. Can the Heat stay healthy? How much time will they get to gel? Once they get healthy, can they stay healthy, or is there going to be another injury on the other side of this? Is somebody else going to try to rip somebody else's arm out of their socket? Who knows? The Heat have had 29 different starting lineups this year. They have had 190 games lost due to injury. That's the 3rd most in the league. Memphis is at the top with 311, which is just bananas. Portland is right there with Miami at 191 games lost. But you know what the Heat have that Memphis and Portland doesn't? Playoff hopes.
Winning record?
Right, a winning record. Like, this is by far the team with the only team with a winning record that has this many injuries by far that they're dealing with. They need to get healthy. They need to stay healthy. They need time to gel, especially with these new pieces. That leads me to my next thing, the starting lineup. Is this the starting lineup? Is this it? Is it Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, and Bam Adebayo? I like that starting lineup. I love the rotations that Spo has been able to get to when this group had been healthy for about a week before these injuries to Rozier and Richardson and Jimmy Butler had to miss some time. But that starting group was outscored their opponents by 19 points in their 41 minutes. It's not a lot. The Heat don't have a single lineup, starting or otherwise, that has logged more than 79 minutes all season. Just a bananas number through 50 plus games, right? Like the Celtics, who have like the best starting 5 in the league by net rating, like they're almost at 400 minutes, and the Heat, their heaviest used lineup is 79 minutes, and those lineups have Kyle Lowry in them, and he's not even on the team anymore. So but I like what we've seen in the limited sample, an offensive rating of 126.7, which is really, really good. It would be the greatest offense ever by far. But obviously they're not going to do that, but the early returns have been positive.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next question too, because as good as that starting lineup has been, I think that a lot of Heat fans have seen something positive when Duncan Robinson is the starter. Obviously, the numbers reflect his impact. So what is Duncan Robinson's role going to be? Will his minutes be cut? And how does he respond? Because I think that's a huge concern of mine, is knowing that he looks so much more polished and complete as a player when he's out there as a starter, as opposed to when he's coming off the bench. It's not to say that he necessarily struggles, but obviously the win-loss record when he's a starter kind of reflects his immediate impact. So I have, some, again, concerns about whether or not his minutes are going to be cut, because I think this team plays better when Duncan's out on the floor. And I think that shows, especially when their offense tends to bog down, as it probably will. And when things are different in the playoffs, as defenses key in on certain players, or when Jimmy Butler gets double teamed, and when Bam's doesn't have a shot falling, you need somebody who is that release valve on offense to be able to ignite their offense. I know he's ignitable. And I think Duncan is probably the best suited for it. Could be Rozier. It could be Hero. I mean, there are other options on the team, but I think things just flow differently with Duncan out there.
A couple of things there. When you said, are his minutes going to get cut, is that because the signing of Delon Wright? Is that why you're
Delon Wright, everybody's healthy, etc.
Because when they're healthy, I think he's got the spot in the rotation. I think Delon Wright pushes Josh Richardson for minutes. I think they're really comfortable with what Duncan Robinson provides. And you're right, because he is so important. He's their only off-ball three-point shooting threat on a game-to-game basis. Tyler Hero can get there when he's feeling like it. Sometimes some nights he could be off ball. Some nights he prefers to be on ball. Do you think that Duncan Robinson should start?
I don't know. I don't. We saw Caleb kind of rounding into form. At this point, I'd be much more comfortable, I think, with Duncan starting and probably Terry coming off the bench. But I don't know.
Oh, so you start Duncan and Tyler?
Yes. I think you can afford to do that. Again, I think they're both improved defensively. And I know that you're going to see them targeted, but guess what? That's going to happen. It doesn't really matter. They have to be able to hold their own, and it's up to everybody else to kind of find a way. I think, again, you have that balance with 3+ defenders and Martin, Butler, and Bam. I think that kind of offsets it a little bit. Rozier is a plus defender. At least he's mostly been very good throughout his career. I think he's still struggling a little bit in terms of how to adjust here in Miami. We'll see whether or not he's able to make that adjustment once he returns and he's healthy. But yes, I think Duncan should start.
Most people would say replace Tyler Hero with Duncan Robinson because it's just like
Yeah, I know.
like an offensive leaning for an
I think that
offensive
ship
leaner.
has sailed, and it's sailed years ago, so I'm not
No,
going to even go there.
so you're just done dreaming about it. People could complain about it, but you're being realistic about it. Because I'm with you, it's not going to happen. If it was going to happen,
Right.
it was going to happen when he came back from the injury earlier this year, and as soon as he was healthy and ready to play a full allotment of minutes, he was back in the starting lineup. Duncan was back on the bench, even though Duncan Robinson had been playing awesome in his minutes. I like the rim pressure that Rozier gets. I know that Duncan Robinson driving is a thing, but he doesn't get rim pressure the way that Rozier does. He just doesn't. And Rozier on the floor, Miami's frequency of getting corner threes has ticked up dramatically from one of the worst teams in the league in generating corner threes to one of the best teams in the league in generating corner threes when Rozier is on the court. And that corner three was a huge tool in fueling that finals run last year when they started getting those against Milwaukee and New York. That was a big reason why they were able to get as far as they did and then take the Celtics out in the Eastern Conference Finals. So we'll see. But I think Duncan Robinson's going to play a huge role, and I think it's good to flag that. All right. Bam Adebayo has a lot of money on the line, and he can make that money based on what he does this season. We'll explain that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by our partners over at eBay Motors. They've teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. Let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. We've got 5 players listed for you here. Ayo Dosunmu, he makes a return to this list with Patrick Williams out. Ayo's probably going to get a bump in his minutes. Scoot Henderson, who Miami will see in the upcoming road trip, has been their starting point guard. We'll see whether or not he's able to be available, because I know he's had some issues with injury as well, but we'll see whether or not he kind of gets some return to mild efficiency, because he has not been dominant. Keontae George has had a really good rookie season for the Utah Jazz, and Marvin Bagley III, he's the only center left on Washington's roster. Kelly Olynyk now with the Toronto Raptors. Is he going to have a role that's clearly defined there? Are they still going to be playing for something? Is he going to be able to bump up his production? Trey Mann is also another name out there. I wonder whether or not he's going to be able to play some more minutes now. So we'll see whether or not he has a bump in his production. Anybody there that you particularly like moving forward?
I'm a big Keontae George guy. I love what I've seen from him in Utah. Yeah, he's one of my guys. I would go Keontae George. But I have Kelly Olynyk on my fantasy team, so I'm hoping that he's the one that breaks out.
Either one, good choices. But George, I think he's just going to get more opportunity. Utah, they're not making a playoff push. They're not going to tank games because that's just not who they are. But at the same time, having made the trades that they did, they're clearly, again, kind of soft rebuilding here.
It means a lot of shots for the rookie.
Exactly. So Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. Who doesn't love taking care of your car? You want to be able to get from place to place. It's your modus operandi. It's what you need in order to get around from place to place, whether it's work or school, or see your partners and loved ones, your family members. Your car is everything, especially in an area like South Florida. You have to drive so far, so often. You need it to be in tip-top shape. So if you want to fix your car and make it the best you can, then make sure to look up eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly with roof racks, bumpers, whatever your car needs. eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your car alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions do apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. All right, let's keep going with our biggest questions for the final 27 games of the season. I want to talk about Bam Adebayo.
Yeah.
Does he make one of the All-NBA teams, or does he win Defensive Player of the Year? And I ask those questions because obviously Bam wants to do both of those things, but also he's got a lot of money on the line for that. If he gets Defensive Player of the Year, or if he's named to the All-NBA, one of the 3 All-NBA teams, he becomes eligible for a super max extension that's worth 4 years, $245 million. He's going to be eligible for an extension if he doesn't qualify for the super max of 3 years, $152 million this summer, regardless. So that's a difference average annually of $12 million. That's a whole lot of cash, David. So a lot on the line for Bam here, I think Defensive Player of the Year, it's probably not going to happen. It feels like it's Rudy Gobert as a lock for that. And if it's not Rudy Gobert, Jared Allen is moving up the boards on FanDuel and things like that. I just don't know that it's going to happen for Bam. But I do think All NBA is within the realm of possibility. So let's keep this in mind. Bam can only, and this is another big thing that I'm monitoring, he can only miss 6 more games and remain eligible for any of these awards after missing time with that hip injury. So he can only miss 6 more games. He has made it clear that he intends to play every game that he is healthy. Yeah. So he does not plan on sitting out second night of back-to-backs. He's not planning on resting if the last couple of games of the regular season don't matter going into the playoffs. Like, he's not planning on doing any of that. He wants to go after this. So, but Jimmy Butler has been eliminated. So that takes away that opens up maybe a spot on the All-NBA team. Joel Embiid has been eliminated, obviously opening up a spot on the All-NBA team. Tyrese Halliburton is probably not going to make it. He can only miss 5 more games. We'll see what happens with him. But let's eliminate those 3 guys. I think, assuming health, I've got 10 players as a lock for All-NBA. No particular order. I got Steph, Luka, Durant, Giannis, SGA, LeBron, Jokic, Kawhi, Donovan Mitchell, and Jason Tatum. I think those guys are a lock to make it, assuming health. Yep. So that leaves a pool of about a dozen players to choose from for 5 spots. And let's also keep in mind, it is positionless this year, which kind of helps Bam because he's not competing for basically 3 center spots, but also can hurt him because he's competing with every player in the NBA now. But that pool, I've narrowed it down to a short list of Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, Anthony Davis, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Larry Markkinen, and Bam. So 5 spots out of that group. I think
not
Bam,
good odds.
You don't like the it's tough. It's going to be tough for him. But that means if he plays like he did the first 3 weeks of the season, I think he can make it.
That's a big question. I mean, it's a good question to see whether or not, more than the eligibility or anything like that, is just whether or not he raises his level of play overall. And I think that's the thing, is that, obviously he wears so many different hats on this team. And I think that's kind of ebbed away at the level of production that we saw from him earlier in the season offensively. So you wonder whether or not he's going to focus on that. And I think he also has enough of a level head where he's not going to put himself in a position where he could get or re-aggravate any injury, especially if it could cost the team during the playoffs. I think he'll wind up sitting games for sure over the next 27 games. I think that's just likely. Yeah. But at the same time, I don't know that he can surpass most of the players on that list that you read out there. Like, there were only maybe a couple, Markkinen and somebody else.
I'd put him over Markkinen. I'd probably put him over Towns. I would.
Over Gobert, maybe, just because it's the one-dimensional aspect of what Rudy provides.
Yeah, but it's hard if you win Defensive Player of the Year to also not make All-NBA. Jalen Brunson's going to make it, the New York Media Mafia. I should have made him a lock. He's going to make it, probably.
He's been great. I mean, that's not a knock.
He deserves it. Jalen Brunson, I would put him on my top. He's easily been one of the best 15 players in the league this year. I'll say this about Bam. Only 4 players are averaging at least 20 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 stocks. Stocks are blocks plus steals. 3 of them are locks, or would have been if Joel Embiid wasn't hurt. It would be Joel Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic, and then Adebayo. Like, Adebayo is in that. He's not in that class in terms of maybe one of those are the 3 best players in the NBA right now. But the numbers he's putting up, plus what he provides defensively, that I don't think any of those guys really provide the same way that, like, in terms of Bam's versatility defensively, and this the night-to-night effort he gives on that end. I don't know.
Sabonis and Fox really kind of cancel each other out too, because they're both Kings players, so you have to pick one. You could say
does that help Miami then?
Yeah,
because
probably.
If Jimmy Butler's eliminated, and if Miami is in one of the top 6, it kind of feels like you'd have to have a Heat. I think some voters would be like, we have to have a Heat player on here, and Jimmy Butler is not eligible. And as long as Bam's eligible, maybe Bam does. I don't know. I'm going to be optimistic about Bam, but we'll see. It's just something to monitor. What's your next question?
We talked about it a little bit before in terms of the 3-point shooting, especially the corner 3, but can Terry Rozier regain his shooting from beyond the arc? It's not like he was lighting it up from Charlotte and while he was there, but he's been a somewhat inconsistent shooter throughout his career, but he's just been really bad in a Heat uniform. So I think that's something definitely to consider, that he's been hovering like around 20-something% since he joined the Heat. And I know a lot of that is kind of just, maybe he's pushing himself. Maybe he's kind of put a lot of pressure on himself and trying to figure out, but it's a lot less attempts too. If anything, that's a kind of a concern, is that on less attempts, somehow he's been even less efficient than he was in Charlotte. He's putting up a lot more shots, and he had a lot more freedom to put those shots up in Charlotte. And yet here, it just seems like he's not very comfortable from 3-point range. And I think in order for Miami to have him out on the floor, and in order for Miami to be their very best version, you need that kind of threat from Terry Rozier. If he's out there shooting blanks for the next 27 games during the postseason, nobody's going to guard him, and all of a sudden it's 5-on-4, and you can just kind of ignore him from 3-point range.
Yeah, it becomes the Kyle
Especially if
Lowry
his injury
situation.
kind of takes some of yeah, exactly. So you don't want that. That's why you make the trade in the first place, hoping that he could ignite the offense or provide a spark. It doesn't seem.
I'm not worried about it. He's a career 36.5% 3-point shooter. He's a good 3-point shooter for his career. Even what he did in Charlotte, like, I'm looking at his full body of work. He's a good shooter. I'm not worried about it. I think you're absolutely right when it comes to he's getting it. He's playing a new offensive role than he did in Charlotte for most of the season. And we saw this with the Heat as a team last year. Couldn't hit a shot if their life depended on it all season long. And in the playoffs, they all caught lightning in a bottle, and boom, next thing you know, the 8th seed's in the NBA Finals. So you know what? This is good. This is a good thing. Keep
looking forward to 45% from
Terry Rozier. Yeah, keep bluffing Terry Rozier. Yeah, just keep holding out, baby. Let's breeze through a couple of them. I'm wondering if the defense is real. They're right now 8th in defensive rating. They started out the year great. October, November had a defensive rating around of 111 points allowed per 100 possessions. December, it got worse, 116 points, about average. January, about the same, about league average. And then in February, through the first few games of February before the break, they had a defensive rating of 104.8, which was tops in the league for that month and would rank within the top 5 for this season. I don't think they're quite that good. I think the cupcake schedule definitely helped them at the beginning of these first few games of February. But they can't. I think they're better than they were. They cannot be league average. So I think they'll settle somewhere between like 8th and 11th probably by the end of the season. That feels about right. But I just wonder what this defense is. Are they actually good? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm more optimistic. I think that the focus is, you can kind of take your foot off the gas in the first 50 some odd games and then kind of ramp it up as the playoffs near. So I think we'll see a return to that. That's kind of historically what Spo-led teams have done. So I'm feeling a little optimistic, especially with the addition of this guy. So what is Delon Wright's role exactly? And I think that's something that I'm curious to see play out over the next 27 games, even though that might necessarily mean nothing when it comes to the playoffs, because we've seen players go into the playoffs and then all of a sudden you get a completely different role. Is he going to be, completely out of the rotation? Is he going to start? All possibilities are there for any Heat players. So I think that's a big question for me.
My last one is, can the Heat escape the play-in tournament? It's going to be a lot of standings watching over these next couple of months here. Miami right now 7th in the East at 30-25. The Pacers are a half game up on them. The Knicks are a game and a half up. The 76ers are 2.5 games up, and the Knicks are 3 games up for that 4 seed. I think that's sort of the realm where Miami would like to settle. You do not want to be 7-10. You don't want to end up in the play-in tournament. Again, I know Miami made out of it last year. It's too much of a coin flip, too much variance to flirt with again. You don't want to get in there. And you want to try to maybe even get some home court if you can get as high as number 4. The Knicks, despite having been the hottest team in the league for about a month, suddenly are succumb with injuries. Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, Bogdanovic, Mitchell Robinson, a bunch of other guys have been hurt. The Sixers obviously dealing with Joel Embiid. I think the Pacers will fall. Yeah. And I think there's a chance that with these injuries, the Knicks and the Sixers can fall. We've seen the Sixers make their big run of the season. We've seen the Knicks make their big run this season for January. Miami hasn't made their big run. And I don't know that it's coming. Nobody knows. Right. But if you got 27 games to maybe go on a run here, and the schedule kind of lends itself for that to happen. Miami, when you consider the strength of schedule, opponent winning percentage, and rest advantage, Miami has the 7th easiest schedule remaining in the NBA. That's awesome because you compare that to the Sixers, 26th easiest schedule. So in other words, the 5th hardest schedule. The Knicks are 22nd easiest schedule, and the Pacers have the 13th easiest schedule. So Miami, based on their competition, has the easiest remaining schedule. And so if they can get healthy and you get this version of Jimmy Butler that we saw over the last 7 games before going into the break, I think a run is there for Miami to make. And if they do make it at the right time, we could be looking like we could wake up at the end of the regular season and be like, oh my God, the Heat are the number 4 seed in the East.
I think it's possible. I certainly do. But unfortunately, with all these players coming back and players still out with injury and everything else, and now the acquisition of a new player, who is going to fall out of the rotation? And I think a lot of Heat fans are concerned about whether or not it's Josh Richardson or Duncan Robinson or whoever it might be. Again, I don't necessarily think it's Duncan. I think it's mostly Nikola Jovic who seems likely to fall out of the rotation, although there's a possibility of Haywood Highsmith. I think he can earn some minutes because obviously with Eric Spoelstra's premium on defense being what it is, I think Haywood's still going to have some opportunities. We saw even last year in the playoffs where he had his minutes, but somebody's going to fall out. It seems likely to be Nico. So just letting Heat fans know ahead of time, don't expect any big performances for Nikola Jovic in the playoffs because he doesn't seem likely to even get on the floor.
Yeah, I've got a core 8 in Miami's rotation: Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Jaime Jaquez, and Kevin Love. And I think Josh Richardson and Delon Wright will probably fight for that 9th rotation spot, which means that Jovic is out, Haywood Highsmith is out. Like, there's definitely certain matchups where they could be used, right, strategically by Spo. But I think that by the time you get to the
playoffs,
playoffs,
make any difference last year, right? I mean, he went into the same lineups every series despite the different opponents.
That's what you do in the playoffs, right? You just play your game. You play the guys, like the 8 or 9 guys who you trust the most. And I think that's what it's going to be. I think that's what it's, and by the way, that's fine. Nikola Jovic has gotten a ton of really great experience in his second year in the NBA at 20 years old. Like, it's okay, Heat fans. If the other 8 players are better, they're just better. And that's good news. All right. 27 games left during the Miami Heat season, at least in the regular season. Huge ramp up towards the playoffs. Stay with us here on Locked On Heat after every game. We will have a show during the week, and we'll have a ton of great interviews and all these great things as the season goes on. And we're going to be ramping up for the playoffs too. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast app.